Dave Rauch here with ProTech Building Services. I'm the CEO, and I'm here today with Gary Porter, who came here from Las Vegas, and he is the owner of Facilities Advisors. And today's interview is going out in the newsletter, The Maintenance Manager, which goes to about 7,000 people in our industry, mostly community association managers, attorneys, vendors, guys like us. And so that will be coming out in November. So with that, Gary, I know you're a reserve study analyst.
Correct.
And you've been doing reserve studies since 1982, which is a long time ago.
That's 40 years ago.
40 years ago. So you've been involved in CAI and National Reserve Studies for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about your early involvement and also the other things that your company does in addition to reserve studies?
Certainly, thank you. And thank you for inviting me down here. I really appreciate it. Our company has been in existence as a separate reserve study company since 2003. Prior to that, I did my reserve studies actually through my CPA firm. I am a CPA. Mm-hmm. I'm the guy that wrote the book for this industry that every CPA nationwide follows. That's actually how I got my first reserve study. In July 1982, a manager came to me before there was any law in California and said, I need to do a reserve study. And I said, what's that? And he said, you're a budget expert. You're a financial expert. Mm-hmm. He said, I've got the maintenance side of this. I need somebody with the financial side. So that's when I first got involved in doing reserve studies.
Wow.
And it has simply grown since then. I am still an active, semi-active partner in my CPA firm, mm-hmm. and CEO of Facilities Advisors. We've got a team of 6 people nationwide that mm-hmm. Cover it, and we also travel to Mexico, Canada, the Caribbean. I've got projects coming up in Australia and Asia.
So, and you just told me about 2 ski resorts, Killington and Purgatory.
Right.
My passion.
Two ski resorts we're working with, and I just love working with new projects like that. It's like, mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about how much one of those ski lifts costs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I never knew, but now I know.
Well, before we jump into commercial, I want to stay with the reserve studies. So was anybody doing reserve studies before you started doing them in 82?
Nobody that is still remaining in the business.
So you're a true authority on reserve studies.
I don't know if I'm an authority. I'm just an old guy. I've been around a long time.
Wow. Well, that's really cool. But I think what's unique about your company is that not only do you do reserve studies, but you do other things. You do reserve studies and plans, capital budgets, I believe,
yeah.
for large commercial projects.
Correct.
So can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure, because the commercial projects are really different from the standard reserve study as we see it in the community association industry. Mm-hmm. And the difference is when I go to a commercial client, they don't need to hire an engineer because they've got engineers in-house. Mm-hmm. They've got experts in-house. So
the maintenance staff.
The maintenance
building
staff.
Engineer. Gotcha.
And when I'm working with them, I don't have to go out and figure out what should go into the reserve study. They already know. They've given me this information. So the nature of my work changes. I'm checking rather than creating. Mm-hmm. And so the actual amount of work I need to do on a very large project, and I'm talking projects where we have $1 billion worth mm-hmm. of replaceable components mm-hmm. versus our little $2 or $3 million in a condo project. I mean, mm-hmm. these are big projects. I'm checking for completeness. I'm checking to test their assumptions regarding estimated lives, remaining lives, etc. So it's a completely different process, and what they're really looking for from me is they want my knowledge on capital budgeting. Mm-hmm. They want the software, and they want the ability to give a report to their financial folks that won't get them laughed out of the room, meaning it needs to be something that their CPAs will understand.
Right, right.
Because I'm a CPA, I can do that pretty easily.
And now I've read an article, a few articles you've written, and we've talked a lot. And I understand that your frustration with the condominium association industry is the fact that a lot of boards and community association managers mistake a reserve study for a maintenance plan. And
Correct.
you know, because most associations, most HOAs don't have a maintenance plan. And so can you elaborate a little bit about I guess it's your work in the commercial industry that has brought you to that conclusion.
That's correct. And in the commercial industry, some of them don't have formal maintenance plans, but they all have very robust and comprehensive maintenance programs.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing all the right things. When I come into the community association industry, most of the people who run the associations don't have the knowledge. They don't know what they don't know, so they're not doing the maintenance. And when reserve studies first started, and the reason so many engineers and contractors do reserve studies, they had to come in and fake a maintenance plan.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, a maintenance plan is maybe 1/4 or 1/3 of the whole capital budgeting process, but in the community association, it all got wrapped together. So there's this confusion by managers of thinking, hey, that reserve study is my maintenance plan.
Right.
No, it's not. It misses all of the operational stuff, and it typically misses the big stuff that goes beyond the 30-year life. So there's a real gap in what is being produced versus what should be produced.
Right, like in the HOA industry, we know that there's a lot of long-lived building components that don't qualify for that 4-part test that aren't even in a reserve study. They're not reserved for, such as concrete and steel and building skin and a lot of things.
That's true, and I have complained for decades about the 4-part test of saying it's not adequate.
Right.
We need more, and a group of us got together and created some standards that allow us to get more. But the fact is, when you're looking at a reserve study, and I'll make a prediction, you and I both know there were thousands, tens of thousands of associations built in California in the 1970s and the 1980s. Those associations are all reaching near the end of life cycle on a lot of their components, particularly the plumbing inside the wall.
Sewers.
I've worked on 19 projects where we've had either partial or complete replacement of that component.
Yeah.
It is the most expensive component, and you never see it in a reserve study.
And it's almost similar to Champlain Towers South, which collapsed, you know, and they're doing a big investigation as what precipitated that collapse. But you and I both know they didn't have a maintenance plan. They never had a maintenance manual. They didn't do regular maintenance. And they didn't have a reserve study, I understand, until the last 5 years of the life of the building. So they had what I call the triple crown of pain. No plan, no maintenance program, no reserve study.
No, absolutely. And the aftermath in Florida has, again, got me frustrated because all you hear people screaming about is, we need to have inspections and we need to have reserve studies. And over the last year, I have said dozens of times, inspections do not stop buildings from falling down. Reserve studies don't stop buildings from falling down. Maintenance is the only thing that stops buildings from falling down. And they're not paying attention to it. Now, we now have 3 states, as I understand it, that have mandated maintenance plans for condominium associations. My personal opinion, that should be nationwide.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. They need that professional guidance.
It's California, Oregon, and Minnesota. Or is it
There's one more in the East Coast that's just picked up, and I'm not sure who it is.
Okay, and I do know that Florida just created a new law, a pretty extensive law on, they require reserve studies, they also require various building inspections. These are structural inspections, not the ongoing maintenance inspections, but they're requiring structural inspections. And again, I couldn't agree with you more that the structural inspections that they did at Champlain Towers South didn't save Champlain Towers South. So in my opinion, the structural inspections have limited utility.
No, I agree. The new law they created is called the Structural Integrity Reserve Study,
Mm-hmm.
and a group of about 30 reserve preparers have gotten together trying to point out to the legislation in Florida the flaws in that law. The fact is,
Mm-hmm.
there aren't enough engineers and architects in the state to perform all the studies that they need to save that.
Yeah.
And the folks that are doing the structural inspections typically aren't prepared to or not qualified to do the reserve study side of it, the financial side. It's pretty rare, and it requires either a structural engineer or an architect. We have an architect we have been working with for about 8 years who is licensed in Florida. So he and my partner Pierre have teamed together, and we are already performing structural integrity reserve studies in the state of Florida.
And of course, once you have your structural inspection done and they've identified all the repairs that need to be done, you have to get in line to get those repairs done.
Correct. And the one thing that new law, and I'm not totally familiar with it, but it requires that they fully fund the structural portions that are pointed out in that structural integrity reserve study. That's separate from the regular reserve study, meaning you still don't have to fund 100% for the roof, but you do for any of the structural issues.
Yep. I've also talked to you about the lack of inspections at many homeowners associations. We in California have SB 326, the new deck inspection. Actually, it's not just decks, it's exterior elevated elements, decks plus. But that's just in California. What inspections do you see that HOAs nationwide need that aren't just structural inspections for high rises?
Well, again, I know you and I have talked a little bit about the fact that I think as part of a maintenance plan, I see 3 levels of inspections that should be done. There's inspections by the people that are actually doing the work. There are inspections that should be done by specialty contractors, and then they have the state mandated inspections of certain things. Like in Massachusetts, for instance, I know that all of the boilers have to be inspected on a 3-year cycle by a mechanical engineer. It's a requirement. It's in the law. When SB 326 came out, I looked at it and said, you know, that makes plenty of sense. I wrapped it up in a package, sent it to all my guys nationwide, and said, even though it's only required in California, we should be recommending this everywhere.
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Really does.
Yeah, there's things about it that I don't agree with. The difficulty, the expense of the inspection, because only an architect or a structural engineer can do them. That's one problem. It's got a few other things, but I do know they are tweaking 326 right now.
Well, they should. And we have one association in the Bay Area that just got a bid for inspections of over $250,000.
Yeah,
it's very expensive.
It's heartbreaking, the expense of some of these inspections, because they've never been done prior.
Right.
So anyhow, let's jump to another subject, which is, a lot of boards of directors in the U.S. of HOAs misrepresent or they mistake their reserve study for a maintenance plan and think that they don't have to do maintenance if they have a reserve study. Can you do you have any stories about how you've seen boards do that?
None that specifically come to mind, but you're right. It's a real problem. Literally, we have been fired from jobs by managers where they have come to us and said, we need the reserve study so that we know what to do. And I tell them, no, your maintenance plan, you should be telling me what you're going to do. I'm doing the budget as part of the reserve study. They don't make that connection. There is just a total confusion on that. And it really is frustrating, because it also lets me know they're not doing a lot of maintenance. There should be. And I have to give you so much credit. I always look up to you as being the icon in our industry. You've been banging on this drum for at least 25 or 30 years about doing maintenance. I've been doing it for 10 years. I'm a relatively newcomer to it, but nobody else is. I mean, you're the only two.
Yeah, well, I think we both agree that it's great to plan to do work or to have a reserve study, but the real benefit of a reserve study is that you see what you have to spend to replace something after 20, 30, 40 years. Why not get it to last longer than that? The focus should be on how we get those components to last the longest possible time. And, get
Totally agree. Now,
Yeah.
you very kindly allowed Andy Henley to join me on a couple of talks last year, and I love the example he had of a photo of the painter at Disneyland painting the wrought iron fence at Main Street, USA.
Yeah.
I love that. That fence, if I remember correctly, is about 70 years old and has never been replaced and never will be replaced because they maintain it literally almost on a daily basis. They're out there touching up paint.
Yeah,
Great story.
I just saw in the news on the hurricane some pictures of Cuba. You see those cars that they have cars, American-made cars in Havana that are, they were built in the 1940s and 50s, and they're still running throughout the city. So yeah, you can make these buildings and building components last a long time and put off the expense of replacing them a great deal. But anyhow, let's switch to another subject, which is with 9% inflation, or some people say it's more like 15% inflation. Material costs are skyrocketing. All the components that you write your reserve studies for, and the capital budgets too, those prices must be changing. How are you and how is the reserve study industry dealing with these changing prices?
And that's a topic we talk about a lot, and there is no consensus on this. But I will tell you from experience, as I said, July 1982, I did my first reserve study, and if you remember, Jimmy Carter was president, and inflation was running 18%.
Oh, that's right.
It was horrible, and we looked at it, and I realized this is completely unsustainable. We cannot apply an 18% inflation factor. We just kind of reached out and grabbed a number of 7%, and it worked out. Now, I've put together tables that literally cover the last 100 years based on government statistics of interest and inflation. But the reserve study is a 30-year funding cycle that we're looking at. So I smooth it out. And yeah, we're spiking at 8-9% right now, but if you look at what is the 5-year average or what is the 30-year average, the numbers are much lower. We're telling all of our clients, you need to do lots of updates over the next 5 years because anything short-term is going to get hit hard. Longer term, we're willing to let it ride at a lower inflation rate, but right now, you just need to keep pricing everything. I just had one of my timeshare clients come in and give me an updated bathroom renovation cost, which we had plugged in at about $12,500. The new number was $39,000.
Wow.
Now, this is for a kind of a high-end timeshare, but I asked them, are these gold-plated toilets? I mean, what are you doing in there? But those are the kind of numbers we're hearing.
And so when you're talking to boards, like, this will reach a lot of board members, this video, and I guess we should say to them in the next 2-3 years that their reserve study numbers are going to change. Is that correct?
They absolutely are going to change, and we don't really push the annual update to the reserve study. If our clients want it, we're happy to do it for them, but a lot of them don't. But the fact is right now we're telling them you need to because the prices are changing daily. You just, you may see numbers that are 200% higher next year. You can't rely on this.
Yep. All right. Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us here today. I certainly appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Very good. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much.
Thank you.